The most important thing in your life, the paycheck that feeds you, the savings that protect you. The money you think you own might not actually be real. The money in your bank account or in your pocket, what if governments and central banks can create it out of thin air, even erase its value overnight, and still make you accept trusting it as if it were sacred? Does that sound like a conspiracy theory? It isn't. It's the world we live in. And the moment everything changed already happened, while most people were asleep. The date was August 15th, 1971. President Richard Nixon appeared on American television on a Sunday night, interrupting regular programming. With calm authority, he explained that the United States was temporarily suspending the guarantee to convert the dollar into gold. In other words, foreign governments could no longer exchange the dollars in their hands for the gold that had always backed them. Temporary, he said. An emergency measure, he said. But it became permanent. And it was revolutionary. That night, the link between money and reality was severed. The dollar was no longer a promise of something tangible. It was only a promise to itself, a symbol of trust placed in a government's word. To understand this, we need to go back a bit. After the Second World War, world leaders built a system called Bretton Woods. In it, currencies were tied to the US dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold, $35 for 1 ounce. The system worked because it gave the world stability. Inflation was under control, trade was predictable, and gold was the system's ultimate anchor. But by the late 1960s, America was in trouble. It was spending heavily on the Vietnam War and on domestic social programs. Dollars were, so to speak, flowing out into the world, but the gold reserves in Fort Knox couldn't keep up with that pace. Foreign governments started lining up to exchange their paper money for real gold. And America realized it couldn't keep its promise. Though Nixon's announcement was supposed to be a temporary fix, the gold window was never reopened. By the mid-1970s, the world had entered a new era of money. Money backed not by gold, but by decree. Economists call this fiat money, from the Latin word meaning, let it be done. In practice, it meant money existed simply because governments said so. And for the first time in modern history, there was no longer a natural limit on how much money could be printed. What's truly striking is how quietly this happened. There were no riots in the streets the next morning. Stores still did their grocery business. Workers still cashed their paychecks. The illusion continued. But beneath the surface, something profound had shifted. Humanity had stepped into a world where the foundation of the financial system was not scarcity, but trust. And once trust becomes the only solution, history shows us that it's only a matter of time before cracks appear. Because this wasn't the first time money had been severed from reality. The Romans learned this lesson the hard way. Their coinage, once pure silver, was gradually debased by emperors seeking to fund their armies and their extravagance. Nero cut the silver content of the denarius by nearly a third. Later rulers pushed it even further, until the coins were little more than bronze with a silver coating. Inflation soared, trust collapsed, and people turned to barter. An empire that once took pride in its order watched its economy fall apart because its money was no longer trusted. Centuries later, China's Yuan dynasty tried another experiment, paper money. At first, it was brilliant. Light, easy to carry, easily moved across vast distances. But it wasn't long before emperors discovered the same tempting idea every ruler faces. Why tax your people when you can just print what you need? The presses ran nonstop, and trust evaporated fast. Merchants rejected the paper money, inflation spiraled out of control, and the grand project ended in collapse. Do you see the pattern? Technology changes, centuries change, but the ideas stay exactly the same. Whenever rulers can separate money from real value, they do it. And every time they do, the people pay the price. That's why Nixon's move in 1971 wasn't an isolated event. It was like a new verse in a very old song. This time the difference was scale. Rome collapsed, but the world went on. The Yuan dynasty failed, but trade survived elsewhere. Yet in 1971, the dollar wasn't just America's currency, it was the backbone of the global system. When it abandoned gold, the whole world followed. Currencies began to float. Central banks began experimenting. And governments had already tasted the sweet poison of unlimited debt. At first, it seemed to work. Freed from gold, central banks could cut interest rates to stimulate growth. Governments could spend freely, knowing they could always roll over their debts. And the public adapted too. Inflation in the 1970s was painful, but by the 1980s and 1990s, things seemed to settle down. A new belief was born that central banks could manage the economy the way an engineer fine-tunes a machine. They called it monetary policy, and it gave us decades filled with credit booms, empty bubbles. But here's the truth history makes clear. These systems weren't designed for stability. They were designed for momentum. The debt has to keep growing. The money supply has to keep expanding. The trust has to keep being maintained. If it slows down, the risk of collapse appears. Just like a shark, it has to keep swimming or it dies. And that's exactly where we stand today. A world has emerged where money has no foundation beyond belief, and where central banks and governments wield the printing press like an ultimate weapon. Since 1971, global debt has reached levels once unimaginable. In 1970, U.S. federal debt was about $370 billion. Today, it exceeds $34 trillion. These numbers are so large they can never really register in the mind, like trying to imagine the distance to a star. And yet, this system still depends entirely on those numbers never being questioned. Think about the crises we've lived through: the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, the housing market collapse of 2008, the pandemic stimulus of 2020. Each time, the solution was the same: more money, more credit, more intervention. We're told this is stability. But it isn't stability, it comes from acceleration. And that acceleration always has a cost. You can see that cost in the erosion of purchasing power. In 1971, an ounce of gold was $35. Today it's over $2,000. In the early 1970s, the average home in America cost about $25,000. Now it's closer to $400,000. Wages have risen, yes, but not at the same rate. For most people, the experience of living in the fiat era has been this: working harder, saving less, owning less, and paying more for everything. And yet the system wants you to believe this is normal. This isn't just an American story. Once the dollar abandoned gold, every other major currency followed. Europe, Japan, China, none of them are tied to a fixed reality anymore. Every central bank plays the same game, manipulating interest rates, inflating debt, and praying that trust holds. And here's the brutal truth: trust holds until it disappears. History shows this clearly. Look at Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Crushed under war reparations, the government printed money to escape its obligations. At first, it worked. Factories started running again, workers got paid, the system limped forward. Then prices started doubling weekly, then daily. Families carried their wages in wheelbarrows. Children made kites out of worthless banknotes. And when trust finally broke, the entire economy collapsed, leaving behind anger, extremism, and the seeds of an even darker era. Or take Argentina, a sovereign nation that has defaulted on its debt 9 times in the last century. Every time, the cycle was the same: overspending, inflation, devaluation, collapse, restart. And yet ordinary Argentinians have lived through it, adapting to a reality where saving in their own national currency is folly. They hide dollars under their mattresses, take refuge in real estate, or now, in some cases, turn to cryptocurrency. That's what life looks like when money loses its meaning. So here's the truly unsettling question. If history shows us this pattern, why do we believe it won't happen again on a global scale? The United States, Europe, China, none of them are exempt. The system we've built since 1971 is globalized, interconnected, and utterly dependent on one fragile thing: trust. Once that trust breaks, there's no easy way back. And yet most people never stop to ask the most basic question: what is money? They treat it as if it were natural, eternal, beyond question. But money isn't a law of nature, it's a human invention. It operates on a system built on trust, rules, and enforcement. Once it was seashells or salt. Then it became silver and gold. Then it became paper backed by gold. And now it's paper backed by nothing at all, or even just digital numbers in a bank account. Do you see the trajectory? Each step takes us a little further from reality and a little closer to abstraction. And each step makes the system a little more vulnerable to manipulation. Which brings us to today's new frontier: digital currency. Governments are racing to launch central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. They promise efficiency, convenience, instant transactions. but they also mean total control. Every transaction traceable, every dollar programmable, every citizen's financial life visible to the state. If money is already an illusion held up by trust, imagine the same system deciding, with a single keystroke, whether your money works today or not. Some see cryptocurrency as the solution. Bitcoin, for instance, was designed as digital gold after the 2008 financial crash. Its supply is fixed, and its rules are enforced by code, not politicians. In theory, it offers an escape from fiat money's endless inflation. But it's also volatile, exposed to speculation, and not yet a real replacement for the money people use every day. It might be part of the solution or just another chapter in the same struggle. The real lesson here isn't about gold, Bitcoin, or money itself. The real lesson is about power. Every time money is separated from something tangible, those in power gain freedom, while the rest of us live under risk. Governments can spend beyond their means. Corporations can borrow without discipline. Banks can profit from bubbles. And when everything collapses, ordinary citizens bear the cost. That's the cycle. That's the trap. And it began on the day money stopped being real. So what should we do with this knowledge? First, we need to stop lying to ourselves. We need to stop telling ourselves that debt doesn't matter, that inflation is temporary, that governments always know what they're doing. We need to look at history and recognize the signs. Second, we need to protect ourselves not by running to a single magic asset, but by understanding the system for what it truly is, a machine built on trust, one that will sooner or later collapse. Financial education is the shield. Knowledge of economic history is the weapon. Real wealth isn't just money, it's awareness, resilience, and the ability to adapt when illusions collapse. Because history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Rome's denarius, China's paper notes, Weimar's banknotes, they all remind us of the same truth. Once trust is broken, money dies. And when money dies, societies change forever. The day money stopped being real isn't just a date in 1971. It's a warning, a reminder that nothing that seems permanent actually is. If this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.